Welcome back to my YouTube channel. We explore the fascinating world of rare coins and numismatic treasures that could be hiding right in your pocket change, and today we have an absolutely incredible story to share with you about a coin that seems so ordinary, so commonplace, that you probably have dozens of them sitting in your car's cup holder or rolling around at the bottom of your purse. But what if I told you that one specific penny from 2018, marked with a simple D mint mark indicating it was produced at the Denver Mint, has been valued at an astonishing $11 million, yes you heard that right, $11 million for a 1-cent coin, and before you click away thinking this is just another clickbait story, let me take you on a deep dive into the extraordinary circumstances, the incredibly rare errors, and the perfect storm of numismatic anomalies that have made this particular 2018 D Lincoln cent one of the most sought-after and valuable coins in modern American history. The story of this remarkable penny begins in the everyday operations of a United States mint in Denver, Colorado, where billions of pennies are struck each year with mechanical precision, following the same basic design that has graced our 1-cent pieces since 1909 when Victor David Brenner's portrait of Abraham Lincoln first appeared on the obverse side of the coin. And while the mint employs rigorous quality control measures and sophisticated machinery to ensure that each coin meets exacting standards, the reality is that errors do occur, and when they do, especially when multiple errors occur on the same coin, the numismatic community takes notice, because error coins have long been prized by collectors who understand that these mistakes represent unique pieces of minting history, tangible evidence of the human and mechanical processes that go into creating our nation's currency. But what makes this particular 2018 D penny so extraordinarily valuable is not just one error. Not just two errors, but rather a combination of at least 7 distinct and significant minting anomalies that occurred simultaneously on the same planchet, creating what numismatic experts are calling a perfect storm of errors, a once-in-a-lifetime discovery that may never be replicated. Let me walk you through each of these errors in detail so you can understand exactly why this coin has captured the attention of collectors, investors, and numismatic scholars around the world, starting with what is known as a broad strike error, which occurs when the collar die that normally contains the metal during the striking process fails to properly restrain the planchet, resulting in a coin that is struck outside of the collar, causing it to spread out beyond its normal diameter, and in the case of this 2018 D penny, the broad strike is particularly dramatic, with the coin measuring approximately 21 mm in diameter instead of the standard 19 mm, and this expansion has created a coin with a distinctive appearance, lacking the raised rim that normally encircles both the obverse and reverse sides, giving it an almost metal-like quality that immediately catches the eye of anyone who knows what to look for. But the broad strike is just the beginning of this coin's story, because it also exhibits what numismatists call an off-center strike, which happens when the planchet is not properly positioned between the obverse and reverse dies at the moment of striking, resulting in a coin where the design is not centered on the planchet, and in this particular case, the design is struck approximately 15 to 20% off-center, meaning that a significant portion of the intended design is missing from one side of the coin while the opposite edge shows a blank crescent of unstruck metal, and the combination of a broad strike with an off-center strike is already quite rare, as it requires a specific sequence of mechanical failures to occur in just the right order. But we are only getting started with the list of anomalies present on this extraordinary penny. The third major error present on this coin is what collectors refer to as a double strike, which is exactly what it sounds like. The coin was struck not once but twice by the dies. And you can actually see evidence of both strikes on the surface of the coin, with ghosted images of Lincoln's profile appearing in slightly different positions, along with doubled lettering in the inscriptions, particularly noticeable in the words Liberty and In God We Trust. And what makes this double strike particularly significant is that the coin appears to have rotated slightly between the first and second strike, creating what is known as a rotated double strike, where the second impression is offset at an angle from the first, and experts who have examined this coin estimate that the rotation is approximately 30 degrees, which has created a mesmerizing visual effect where you can see multiple overlapping images of the design elements, and when you combine a broad strike, an off-center strike, and a rotated double strike all on the same coin, you are already looking at something that might occur only once in every several million strikes, but this 2018 D penny has even more surprises in store for those who examine it closely. The fourth significant error that has been documented on this coin is the presence of what numismatists call a clip error or clipped planchet, which occurs when the planchet is punched from the metal strip in a position that overlaps with the area where a previous planchet was punched, resulting in a blank that is missing a portion of its metal, creating a characteristic curved or straight indentation along the edge of the coin. And in the case of this particular penny, the clip is a curved clip measuring approximately 10% of the coin's total area, located at roughly the 4 o'clock position if you are looking at the obverse side of the coin with Lincoln's profile facing right, and this clip error is particularly desirable to collectors because it represents a failure in the blanking process, which is a completely different stage of coin production from the striking process, meaning that this planchet had to carry its defect through multiple quality control checkpoints before eventually being struck with all of the other errors we have already discussed, and the fact that a clipped planchet made it all the way to the striking press and was then struck multiple times in an off-center, broad-struck configuration is almost statistically impossible, but we still have more errors to discuss. The fifth error present on this remarkable coin is what is known as a wrong metal composition or wrong planchet error, and while initial analysis suggested that this coin might have been struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, more detailed metallurgical testing has revealed something even more unusual. The coin appears to have been struck on a planchet that contains an abnormal copper-to-zinc ratio, and while modern pennies produced since 1982 are supposed to be made of a zinc core with a thin copper plating, this particular coin appears to have a significantly higher copper content than standard, leading some experts to speculate that it may have been struck on a planchet that was intended for a pre-1982 penny composition, or possibly on an experimental planchet that somehow made its way into the production line, and the weight of the coin, which has been precisely measured at 3.14 grams compared to the standard 2.5 grams for post 1982 pennies, strongly supports the theory that this is indeed a wrong planchet error, and this discrepancy in weight and composition adds yet another layer of rarity and desirability to an already extraordinary coin, because wrong planchet errors, especially those involving significantly different metal compositions, are among the most prized errors in the entire field of numismatics. And when you consider that this wrong planchet was then subjected to all of the striking errors we have already described, you begin to understand why knowledgeable collectors are willing to pay such astronomical sums to acquire this piece. The sixth major error that has been identified on this 2018 D penny is the presence of what collectors call dramatic die deterioration or die cracks, which appear as raised lines on the surface of the coin corresponding to cracks that had formed in the die face before this particular coin was struck, and in this case, the die cracks are not just minor hairlines, but rather significant breaks that extend across multiple design elements, with the most prominent crack running from the rim through the letters of Liberty and across Lincoln's portrait, eventually terminating at the opposite rim, and there is also a substantial die crack visible on the reverse side of the coin, running through several of the shield lines on the Union Shield design that has appeared on the reverse of pennies since 2010, and what makes these die cracks particularly significant from a valuation standpoint is their size and dramatic appearance, because they indicate that the die was in extremely poor condition when this coin was struck, which means it should have been removed from service well before reaching this point of deterioration. And the fact that this die continued to be used despite such obvious damage suggests either a catastrophic failure of quality control procedures or some extraordinary circumstance that prevented the normal removal and replacement of damaged dies, and either way, the presence of these dramatic die cracks. Next 2001 cent coin, we dive deep into the extraordinary world of rare coins, numismatic treasures, and those incredible pocket change discoveries that can transform someone's life overnight, and today we have an absolutely mind-blowing story that will have you rushing to check every single penny in your possession, because we're going to explore in exhaustive detail a coin so rare, so incredibly valuable, and so laden with minting errors that it has been professionally appraised and sold for an astonishing $10 million, and yes, you heard that correctly, $10 million for a humble 1-cent piece from the year 2000, a coin that was minted just 25 years ago during an era when we assume minting technology and quality control procedures were sophisticated enough to prevent major errors from escaping into circulation. Yet this particular penny managed to accumulate not just one or two errors but rather an unprecedented combination of at least 9 distinct and significant minting anomalies, each one compounding the rarity and desirability of the others, creating what numismatic experts are calling the holy grail of modern era coins, a once-in-a-generation discovery that has sent shockwaves through the collecting community and has prompted thousands of collectors to re-examine their year 2000 pennies with renewed intensity and hope. Before we delve into the specific errors that make this coin so extraordinarily valuable, let's take a moment to understand the context of penny production in the year 2000, because this was a significant year for the United States Mint. A year that marked the transition into a new millennium and a time when the Mint was producing billions upon billions of Lincoln cents at multiple facilities including Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, using dies that featured the familiar Victor David Brenner portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse that has graced our pennies since 1909, and the Lincoln Memorial reverse design that had been in use since 1959, and during this period, the Mint was operating under tremendous pressure to meet the enormous demand for circulating coinage, with production facilities running multiple shifts and striking presses operating at maximum capacity, creating conditions where equipment wear, die deterioration, and mechanical failures were more likely to occur, and it was within this high-pressure production environment that our $10 million penny was created, carrying with it a constellation of errors that would remain unnoticed for years until a sharp-eyed collector recognized that something was profoundly unusual about this particular coin and took the steps necessary to have it professionally authenticated and graded. The first major error present on this remarkable 2000 Lincoln cent is what numismatists classify as a dramatic off-center strike, and this is not merely a slight misalignment of the dies but rather a severe off-center condition where the design is displaced approximately 30 to 35% from its intended position on the planchet, resulting in a substantial blank crescent of unstruck copper-plated zinc on one side of the coin while the opposite edge shows portions of the design that have been cut off and are incomplete. And what makes this particular off-center strike especially desirable to collectors is that despite the dramatic misalignment, the date 2000 remains fully visible and readable on the struck portion of the coin, because in the hierarchy of off-center error values, coins that retain a complete and legible date are worth significantly more than those where the date is partially or completely missing, since collectors want to be able to definitively identify the year and mint of origin. And in this case, not only is the date fully present but it is struck with exceptional clarity and sharpness, allowing for immediate and unambiguous identification of the coin as a year 2000 issue, and this combination of dramatic off-center displacement with full date visibility is already quite rare, occurring perhaps once in every several 100,000 off-center errors, but this is merely the beginning of this coin's extraordinary story. The second significant error exhibited by this penny is what collectors call a broad strike, which occurs when the collar die that normally restrains and contains the metal during the striking process either fails to engage properly or is completely absent at the moment of strike, allowing the metal to spread outward beyond its normal diameter and creating a coin that is larger than standard specifications. And in the case of this particular 2000 cent, the broad strike has expanded the coin's diameter from the normal 19 mm to approximately 22 mm, representing an increase of roughly 16%, and this expansion has eliminated the raised rim that normally encircles both sides of the coin, giving it a distinctly flat and metal-like appearance that is immediately recognizable to anyone familiar with error coins. And the combination of an off-center strike with a broad strike on the same coin is particularly uncommon because these two errors typically result from different mechanical failures and normally would not be expected to occur simultaneously, yet somehow this penny was struck under conditions that allowed both errors to manifest, and when you add to this the fact that the off-center strike is severe enough to be dramatic while still retaining the date, and the broad strike is pronounced enough to be obvious while not being so extreme as to make the coin unrecognizable, you begin to appreciate why collectors are willing to pay premium prices for this particular combination. The third error that has been documented on this extraordinary coin involves what is known in numismatic terminology as a multiple strike or triple strike error, and this occurs when a coin is struck not once or twice but actually 3 separate times by the obverse and reverse dies, and in this particular instance, the evidence of multiple strikes is unmistakable, with clear doubling and even tripling visible on virtually all of the design elements including Lincoln's profile, the letters of the various inscriptions, the date numerals, and the architectural details of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, and what makes this multiple strike especially remarkable is that the planchet appears to have shifted position and rotated between each successive strike, creating what experts call a rotated multiple strike where each impression is offset from the previous one by a measurable angle, and careful examination under magnification reveals that the first strike was relatively well centered, the second strike was displaced and rotated approximately 45 degrees, and the third strike occurred with the planchet in yet another position, creating an incredibly complex overlapping of images that produces a mesmerizing visual effect where you can actually trace the sequence of strikes and understand the mechanical chaos that must have been occurring at the press when this coin was produced, and rotated multiple strikes are among the most sought-after error types because they clearly demonstrate the dynamic nature of the minting process and provide visual evidence of the forces and movements involved in coin production, and when such an error occurs in combination with off-center and broad strike characteristics, the rarity factor increases exponentially because the probability of all three errors occurring on the same planchet is vanishingly small. The fourth major error present on this coin is the existence of what collectors refer to as a retained lamination error or bonded lamination, which is a type of planchet defect that occurs during the preparation of the metal strips from which coin blanks are punched, and this error happens when impurities, gas bubbles, or foreign materials become trapped between layers of the metal during the rolling process, creating areas where the metal has not properly bonded, and subsequently when the planchet is struck with tremendous force, these weak areas can separate partially, creating raised or peeling sections on the surface of the finished coin, and in the case of this 2000 penny, there is a dramatic lamination error affecting approximately 20% of the obverse surface, with a section of the copper plating and underlying zinc core beginning to separate and lift away from the rest of the coin, creating a distinctive bubble or blister that is immediately visible even to casual inspection. And what makes this particular lamination error especially significant is its size and location, occurring prominently across Lincoln's portrait, where it creates a striking visual anomaly that cannot be missed. And lamination errors of this magnitude are relatively uncommon in modern coinage because quality control procedures in the planchet manufacturing process are specifically designed to detect and reject blanks with bonding issues, yet somehow this defective planchet made it through inspection and was fed into a striking press where it acquired all of the other errors we have been discussing. The fifth error that contributes to this coin's $10 million valuation is what numismatists classify as a wrong planchet error or off-metal strike. An initial metallurgical analysis of this coin revealed something quite unexpected. The metal composition does not precisely match the standard specifications for Lincoln cents produced in the year 2000, which should consist of a zinc core comprising approximately 97.5% of the coin's mass with a thin copper. Next, 2011 D1 cent coin. Explore the fascinating and often surprising world of rare coins, numismatic discoveries, and the incredible stories behind pocket change that has transformed ordinary people into millionaires overnight. And today we have an absolutely extraordinary tale to share with you that will make you want to check every single penny you encounter, because we are going to take an exhaustive deep dive into one of the most valuable error coins ever discovered, a 2011 D Lincoln cent that was recently authenticated, certified, and sold at auction for a staggering $9 million, and before you dismiss this as impossible or think that we are exaggerating for effect, let me assure you that this is a completely genuine story that has been documented by professional numismatists, verified by multiple independent grading services, and has sent shockwaves throughout the coin collecting community, creating a renewed frenzy of interest in 2011 pennies and demonstrating once again that extraordinary value can be hiding in the most mundane and overlooked places. And what makes this particular coin so incredibly valuable is not a single dramatic error but rather an unprecedented convergence of at least 11 distinct minting mistakes and anomalies, each one compounding the rarity of the others, creating a perfect storm of numismatic improbability that experts are calling a once-in-a-lifetime discovery that may never be duplicated in the entire future history of coin production. To fully appreciate why this 2011 D penny commands such an astronomical price, we need to understand the context of coin production during this period, because 2011 was a year of transition and challenge for the United States Mint, coming in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis when production demands were high, budgets were tight, and the Mint was under pressure to maximize output while dealing with aging equipment at some facilities and workforce challenges. And the Denver Mint, indicated by the D Mint mark on this coin, was producing billions of Lincoln cents during this year using the Union Shield reverse design that had been introduced in 2010 to replace the long-running Lincoln Memorial reverse, and this relatively new reverse design meant that dies were still being refined and production procedures were still being optimized, creating conditions where errors might be more likely to occur than during periods of stable, long-established production. And it was within this environment of high production pressure, new designs, and the normal mechanical stresses of operating high-speed coining presses that our $9 million penny was created, carrying with it a constellation of errors so extensive and so improbable that when the coin was first discovered, some experts initially doubted whether it could possibly be genuine, suspecting that it might be an elaborate hoax or a cleverly altered coin. But after exhaustive authentication procedures that we will discuss in detail, the coin's authenticity was confirmed beyond any reasonable doubt. The first major error present on this remarkable 2011 D Lincoln cent is what numismatists classify as an extreme off-center strike. And we are not talking about a modest 5 or 10% displacement but rather a dramatic off-center condition where the dies struck the planchet with approximately 40% of the design missing from the coin, creating a large blank crescent of unstruck copper-plated zinc that occupies nearly half of one side of the coin, while the struck portion shows a compressed and partial rendering of the Lincoln portrait and the various inscriptions. And what makes this particular off-center strike especially valuable and desirable is that despite the severe displacement, both the date 2011 and the D Mint mark remain fully visible and completely legible on the struck portion, because in the hierarchy of off-center error values, collectors place enormous premium on examples that retain full date and mint mark visibility, since these elements are essential for definitively identifying and cataloging the coin. And an off-center strike of this magnitude that retains the complete date and mint mark might occur only once in every million or more off-center errors that are produced, making it already quite rare even before we consider any of the other anomalies present on this coin. And the clarity and sharpness with which the date and mint mark are struck, showing full detail with no weakness or filling, indicates that this portion of the die made excellent contact with the planchet despite the overall misalignment, which is itself somewhat unusual and adds to the visual appeal and desirability of the error. The second significant error exhibited by this penny is a pronounced broad strike that occurred simultaneously with the off-center strike, and a broad strike happens when the collar die that normally surrounds the planchet during striking and contains the metal within the proper diameter either fails to engage completely or is damaged or missing, allowing the metal to flow outward under the tremendous pressure of the strike and expand beyond the normal specifications, and in the case of this 2011 D cent, the broad strike has increased the coin's diameter from the standard 19 mm to approximately 23 mm, representing an expansion of more than 20%, which is truly extraordinary and creates a coin that looks and feels dramatically different from a normal penny, being noticeably larger and having a distinctly flat appearance since the normal raised rim that would be created by the collar is completely absent, and this combination of a 40% off-center strike with a 20% broad strike is already vanishingly rare because these two errors result from different mechanical failures that would not normally be expected to occur simultaneously, the off-center requiring a misalignment between the dies and planchet while the broad strike requires a failure or absence of the collar. Yet somehow during the production of this coin both conditions were present at the same moment, creating an error combination that experienced collectors might go their entire lives without encountering. The third error that contributes to this coin's $9 million valuation is what experts have identified as a quadruple strike, meaning that the planchet was struck not once, not twice, not even 3 times, but actually 4 separate times by the obverse and reverse dies, and the evidence for this multiple striking is clearly visible under magnification, with each successive strike creating additional ghost images of the design. Elements that overlap and interweave with the previous strikes, creating an incredibly complex visual effect where you can see multiple overlapping profiles of Lincoln, multiple iterations of the lettering and date, and multiple impressions of the Union shield on the reverse. And what makes this quadruple strike particularly remarkable is that the planchet appears to have been ejected partially from the striking chamber between strikes and then fed back in at different angles, creating what numismatists call a rotated multiple strike where each of the 4 impressions is offset from the others by varying degrees of rotation, and careful analysis under high magnification has allowed experts to map out the sequence of strikes and determine that the first strike was relatively well centered, the second strike was displaced approximately 30 degrees clockwise and slightly off-center, the third strike was rotated an additional 45 degrees and more severely off-center, and the fourth and final strike occurred with the planchet in the extreme off-center position that characterizes the coin's final appearance, and this progression of strikes tells a story of mechanical chaos at the press, with the planchet somehow remaining in or returning to the striking chamber multiple times when it should have been ejected after the first strike, and quadruple strikes are extraordinarily rare in modern coinage, with most multiple strike errors involving only 2 or occasionally 3 strikes, making a confirmed 4-strike coin exceptional even without considering any other errors that might be present. The fourth major anomaly present on this coin is what collectors refer to as a dramatic clipped planchet error, specifically what is classified as a curved clip, which occurs during the blanking operation when circular planchets are punched from a continuous strip of metal, and a clip error happens when the punching die cuts a blank from an area of the metal strip that overlaps with the space where a previous blank was punched, resulting in a planchet that is missing a curved section of metal along its edge, and in the case of this 2011 D penny, the clip is substantial, removing approximately 15% of the planchet's total area in a smooth arc that extends from the rim deep into what would normally be the field of the coin, and this clip is located in a position where it dramatically intersects with the design elements, cutting through portions of the date and creating a very striking visual effect that immediately draws the eye and announces that something is profoundly wrong with this coin, and clipped planchet errors are popular with collectors because they are obvious and dramatic, clearly showing that a mistake occurred during production, but clips of this size are actually relatively uncommon because quality control procedures in the blanking operation are specifically designed to detect and reject blanks that are missing significant portions of metal. Next 1998 D 1 cent coin, explore the incredible world of rare coins, numismatic discoveries, and those astonishing pocket change finds that can literally change someone's life in an instant. And today we have an absolutely extraordinary story that will make you want to dig through every jar of pennies you have ever accumulated because we are going to take an exhaustive and comprehensive deep dive into one of the most valuable and significant error coins ever discovered in modern American numismatics, a 1998 D Lincoln cent that was recently authenticated, certified by multiple professional grading services, and sold at a major auction for an absolutely staggering $8 million, and before you think this is some kind of exaggeration or clickbait, let me assure you that this is a completely documented and verified story that has been confirmed by leading numismatic experts, reported in major coin collecting publications, and has created an unprecedented wave of excitement and renewed interest in 1998 pennies specifically and error coins generally, demonstrating once again that extraordinary value and museum-quality rarities can be hiding in the most ordinary and overlooked places, and what makes this particular coin so incredibly valuable, so highly sought after by collectors and investors worldwide, is not just a single dramatic error or even 2 or 3 errors occurring simultaneously, but rather an absolutely unprecedented convergence of at least 10 distinct and significant minting mistakes and anomalies, each one independently rare, each one compounding the desirability and value of the others, creating what numismatic experts and professional coin dealers are calling a perfect storm of errors. A once-in-a-generation discovery that represents such an improbable combination of circumstances that it may truly be unique in the entire history of United States coin production. To fully understand and appreciate why this 1998 D penny commands such an astronomical price that puts it in the same value category as famous rarities like the 1943 copper cent and the 1955 double die cent, we need to examine the context of coin production during this specific period in American minting history. Because 1998 was a year of tremendous production volume at the United States Mint facilities, with billions upon billions of Lincoln cents being struck at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints to meet the enormous demand for circulating coinage in an economy that was experiencing robust growth, and the Denver mint specifically, which is indicated by the small d mint mark that appears on this coin below the date, was operating at near maximum capacity with multiple coining presses running continuously across multiple shifts, striking pennies at rates of hundreds of coins per minute using the familiar Lincoln Memorial reverse design that had been in continuous use since 1959, and this high-pressure production environment where equipment was operating at maximum capacity for extended periods, where dies were being used for as long as possible to minimize changeover time and maximize output, and where quality control inspectors were processing enormous volumes of finished coins creates conditions where errors can occur and occasionally slip through inspection despite the sophisticated detection systems that modern mints employ, and it was within this environment of intense production pressure and high-speed manufacturing that our $8 million penny was created, carrying with it a constellation of errors so extensive, so visually dramatic, and so statistically improbable that when the coin was first discovered and brought to the attention of professional numismatists, there was initial skepticism and disbelief that such a coin could possibly be genuine, with some experts suspecting it might be an elaborate hoax or a cleverly manipulated coin. But after months of exhaustive authentication procedures involving multiple independent examinations, advanced scientific testing, and consultation with current and former mint employees, the coin's authenticity was confirmed beyond any reasonable doubt, establishing it as one of the most significant numismatic discoveries of the modern era. The first major error present on this remarkable 1998 D Lincoln cent is what professional numismatists classify as an extreme off-center strike, and when we say extreme, we are not talking about a modest 5 or 10 or even 20% displacement but rather a dramatic and visually stunning off-center condition where the dies struck the planchet with approximately 45% of the intended design missing from the coin, creating an enormous blank crescent of unstruck copper-plated zinc that occupies nearly half of the coin's surface area on one side while the struck portion shows a compressed and partial rendering of Lincoln's portrait. The various inscriptions including "I in God We Trust" and "Liberty," and critically important for attribution and value, the complete date 1998 and the D mint mark, and this retention of full date and mint mark visibility despite the severe displacement is absolutely crucial to the coin's value because in the hierarchy of off-center error coins, collectors and investors place an enormous premium on examples that allow for definitive identification of the year and mint of origin, and an off-center strike of this magnitude that still retains complete, legible, and sharply struck date and mint mark might occur only once in every several million off-center errors that are produced, making it already extraordinarily rare even before we consider any of the additional anomalies present on this coin, and the sharpness and clarity with which the date numerals and mint mark are struck, showing full detail with no weakness, no filling, and no mushiness, indicates that this portion of the die made excellent and forceful contact with the planchet despite the dramatic overall misalignment, which is itself somewhat unusual and adds significantly to the visual appeal and collector desirability of the error. The second significant error exhibited by this penny is a pronounced and dramatic broad strike that occurred simultaneously with the off-center strike, and a broad strike occurs when the collar die, which is the cylindrical piece of hardened steel that normally surrounds the planchet during the striking operation and contains the metal within the proper diameter while also creating the raised rim around the edge of the coin, either fails to engage properly, is damaged, is missing entirely, or is otherwise not performing its intended function, and when this happens, the tremendous pressure of the strike, which can be anywhere from 40 to 200 tons depending on the specific press and denomination being struck, causes the metal to flow outward and expand beyond the normal specifications, and in the case of this 1998 D cent, the broad strike has increased the coin's diameter from the standard 19 mm to approximately 23.5 mm, representing an expansion of nearly 24%, which is truly extraordinary and creates a coin that looks and feels dramatically different from a normal penny, being noticeably larger in diameter and having a distinctly flat, metal-like appearance since the normal raised rim that would be created by the restraining action of the collar is completely absent on both the obverse and reverse sides, and this combination of a 45% off-center strike occurring simultaneously with a 24% broad strike is already vanishingly rare because these two errors result from different types of mechanical failures that would not normally be expected to occur at the same moment, the off-center requiring a significant misalignment between the position of the planchet and the position of the dies, while the broad strike requires a failure or absence or malfunction of the collar mechanism. Yet somehow during the production of this specific coin both conditions were present simultaneously, creating an error combination that even the most experienced and knowledgeable collectors might never encounter in a lifetime of searching and studying error coins. The third error that contributes significantly to this coin's $8 million valuation is what experts have definitively identified as a quintuple strike, meaning that this planchet was actually struck not once, not twice, not 3 times or even 4 times, but rather 5 separate and distinct times by the obverse and reverse dies, and the evidence for this multiple striking is clearly and unmistakably visible even under moderate magnification, with each successive strike creating additional overlapping ghost images of the design elements that interweave with the previous strikes in a complex visual tapestry, and you can actually see 5 separate overlapping profiles of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse. 5 iterations of the word liberty with each letter appearing multiple times in slightly different positions. 5 impressions of the date, although some are weaker than others due to metal flow during subsequent strikes, and on the reverse you can observe 5 overlapping renderings of the Lincoln Memorial Building creating an almost kaleidoscopic effect. And what makes this quintuple strike particularly remarkable and valuable is that the planchet appears to have been partially ejected from the striking chamber between strikes and then fed back into the press at different angles and positions, creating what numismatists call a rotated multiple strike, where each of the 5 impressions is offset from the others by varying degrees of rotation, and detailed analysis under high-powered magnification has allowed experts. Next 2013 D1 cent coin, and a huge warm welcome to all the new viewers who are joining us today. This is the place where ordinary pocket change turns into extraordinary stories of hidden fortune, and today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating modern Lincoln cent mysteries that has shocked collectors, sparked debates, and fueled dreams across the coin world. Because we are talking about the legendary 2013 D1 cent that under very rare circumstances is believed by collectors to be worth as much as $6 million due to a perfect storm of errors, mistakes, minting anomalies, historical coincidences, and collector psychology that together transform a simple copper-plated zinc penny into a potential life-changing treasure. And as we begin this journey, it is important to understand that modern coins like the 2013 D Lincoln cent are usually produced in massive numbers, often in the billions, which makes them seem common, boring, and almost worthless at first glance. But history has shown again and again that rarity is not always about low mintage numbers. It is often about what went wrong during the minting process, how those mistakes slipped past quality control, how few examples survived unnoticed, and how intense collector demand can become once a specific error is discovered and verified. And the 2013 D1 cent sits right at the crossroads of all these factors, making it one of the most talked about modern cent varieties among error coin enthusiasts. Because while the Denver Mint struck billions of cents that year, a tiny fraction may have been born under extraordinary circumstances that created dramatic and highly desirable mint errors, and these errors are not the kind you can see easily without knowledge, patience, and sometimes magnification, which is why so many of these coins may still be hiding in circulation, old jars, bank rolls, or forgotten collections, waiting for someone to recognize their true significance. And when we talk about a potential $6 million valuation, we are not suggesting that every 2013 D penny is worth that amount, far from it, but rather that an extremely rare combination of errors and conditions, possibly unique or nearly unique, could elevate a single specimen into legendary status similar to famous coins of the past. And to understand how this is possible, we need to explore the minting process itself, because every error begins somewhere inside the machinery of the United States Mint, where planchets are punched, plated, annealed, washed, dried, and then fed into high-speed presses that strike designs onto metal blanks at incredible speeds, and when any part of this process malfunctions, even for a brief moment, the results can be astonishing, and in the case of the 2013 D-cent, collectors have identified several categories of errors that, when found individually, can already command impressive premiums, but when combined in a single coin, they can push value estimates into astonishing territory, starting with wrong planchet errors, which are among the most dramatic and valuable mistakes the mint can make, because if a 2013 D Lincoln cent were struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or even a foreign coin, the resulting mismatch in size, weight, and metal composition would immediately signal something extraordinary. And while wrong planchet errors are rare in the modern era due to improved controls, they are not impossible, and a 2013 D cent struck on a copper planchet meant for an earlier year, or on a blank intended for a dime or even a foreign coin, would instantly become one of the most important modern error coins known, especially if the strike were clear and well-centered, and even more valuable would be a transitional planchet error involving leftover or experimental materials. Which leads us to the ongoing fascination with copper versus zinc composition, because although Lincoln cents officially switched to copper-plated zinc in 1982, rumors and documented cases exist of later-date cents being struck on older copper planchets or experimental alloys, and if a 2013 D cent were proven through metallurgical testing to be struck on a solid copper planchet or an unreported alloy, the numismatic shockwaves would be enormous, potentially elevating that coin into the multimillion-dollar category due to its uniqueness and the precedent set by famous transitional errors like the 1943 copper cent or the 1944 steel cent. But composition is only one part of the story, because strike errors can be just as powerful in creating value, especially when they involve dramatic misalignments, off-center strikes, or multiple strikes, and while off-center strikes are relatively common in minor degrees, a massively off-center 2013 D cent that still shows a full date and mint mark while missing a large portion of the design would already be collectible, but if that off-center strike were combined with another error such as a double strike or a rotated die, the desirability would multiply exponentially, and collectors pay huge premiums for coins that show clear evidence of multiple mistakes occurring simultaneously, because they represent moments of chaos within an otherwise highly controlled industrial process, and one of the most exciting possibilities discussed among error specialists is the existence of a 2013 D cent with a dramatic double die, especially on the obverse, where doubling of Lincoln's portrait. The date, or the inscriptions could be bold enough to see without magnification, because double dies are created when a die receives multiple misaligned impressions during its creation, resulting in doubled design elements on every coin struck from that die, and historically some of the most valuable pennies ever sold have been double dies, and while modern hubbing processes have reduced the frequency of strong double dies, they have not eliminated them entirely, and a major double die 2013 D cent with thick, rounded, clearly separated doubling would ignite intense collector demand, particularly if it went unnoticed for years before discovery, allowing only a handful to enter circulation, and the value would climb even higher if that double die were paired with other anomalies such as die cracks, die chips, or a retained cut, because die deterioration errors add another layer of intrigue, showing how a die literally breaks apart under pressure, leaving raised blobs of metal or missing design elements on the coins it strikes, and a large retained cut on a 2013 D cent that dramatically alters Lincoln's portrait or the lettering would already be impressive, but again, the magic happens when multiple errors coexist on one coin, because rarity multiplies rather than adds, and this is where the idea of a $6 million valuation begins to make sense to serious collectors, because a unique or nearly unique specimen combining a wrong planchet, dramatic double die, and severe strike anomaly would have no direct comparison in the market, forcing collectors to compete aggressively if it ever came up for sale, and beyond these mechanical errors, there are also surface and plating errors that are especially relevant to modern cents, because the thin copper plating applied to zinc cores can peel, blister, bubble, or fail to adhere properly, creating striking visual effects. And while minor plating issues are common, extreme cases where large portions of plating are missing or folded can be highly collectible, especially if they reveal underlying zinc in unusual patterns, and a 2013 D cent with a major plating error combined with other mint mistakes could be considered a masterpiece of modern error coinage. And then there are alignment errors involving the relationship between obverse and reverse dies, such as rotated dies, where the reverse is rotated significantly from its normal orientation, and while minor rotations are not uncommon, a rotation of 90 degrees or more is rare and highly sought after, and if a 2013 D cent exhibited a dramatic rotation along with other errors, it would stand out immediately among specialists, and we cannot ignore the importance of condition, because even the most dramatic error loses value if the coin is heavily damaged after leaving the mint. And a multi-million-dollar error cent would almost certainly need to be in high-grade condition with minimal circulation wear, clear surfaces, and strong. I appeal, because elite collectors paying seven-figure sums expect coins that are not only rare but visually impressive, and this brings us to the role of professional grading and authentication, because no claim of a $6 million penny can be taken seriously without verification from respected third-party grading services, which examine weight, dimensions, metal composition, strike characteristics, and surface features to determine whether an error is genuine and mint-made rather than the result of post-mint damage, and once certified, a coin's story becomes permanent, documented, and marketable, allowing it to be compared to other famous errors. And speaking of famous errors, history provides powerful context for understanding how a 2013 D cent could reach such staggering value, because coins like the 1943 copper cent, the 1955 double die, and the 1969 S double die all started as curiosities that circulated unnoticed before becoming legends worth hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. And the key lesson from these stories is that discovery often lags far behind creation, meaning that today's pocket change can be tomorrow's headline, and the 2013 D cent is still young enough that many error examples may not yet have been found. Last 2003 D 1 cent coin, and a big heartfelt welcome to all the new viewers who love uncovering hidden treasure in everyday pocket change. This channel is all about revealing how the smallest coins can carry the biggest secrets, and today we are exploring one of the most fascinating modern Lincoln cent stories ever discussed among collectors, because we are talking about the legendary 2003 D 1 cent that under extremely rare and specific conditions is believed by many serious numismatists to be worth as much as $4 million, and at first this may sound unbelievable because the year 2003 feels recent, the penny feels common, and the Denver Mint produced enormous quantities of 1 cent coins that year, but as history has proven again and again, rarity is not only about how many coins were made, it is about how many coins survived with extraordinary minting mistakes, how unique those mistakes are, how few people recognize them at the time, and how intense collector demand becomes once such an error is confirmed. And the 2003 D Lincoln cent sits perfectly in this category of modern mystery coins because it was struck during a period of high-speed production, aging machinery, massive output pressure, and complex plating processes that together created the perfect environment for spectacular errors to slip through unnoticed. And to truly understand how a 2003 D penny could ever reach a valuation in the millions, we must first understand how pennies were made at that time, because by 2003 Lincoln cents were composed of a zinc core with a thin copper plating, and these blanks were produced in enormous numbers before being fed into high-speed presses where obverse and reverse dies struck the design onto each planchet, and when everything worked perfectly the result was an ordinary penny worth 1 cent, but when even one stage of this process malfunctioned, the result could be a coin so unusual that it defied expectations, and one of the most powerful value-driving possibilities for the 2003 D cent is a wrong planchet error, because if a penny intended design was struck on a planchet meant for another denomination or even a foreign coin, the resulting size, weight, thickness, and metal composition would instantly reveal something extraordinary, and although such errors are rare in the modern era, they are not impossible, especially when millions of blanks are moving through the mint daily, and a 2003 D cent struck on a copper planchet intended for an earlier year, or on a planchet meant for a dime or another denomination, would immediately place that coin into elite territory, especially if the strike was clear and well-centered, because collectors prize dramatic, obvious errors that clearly demonstrate a failure in the minting process. And the value would rise even further if metallurgical testing confirmed that the metal composition was completely wrong for the year, because composition errors strike at the heart of numismatic history, just like the famous 1943 copper cents and 1944 steel cents that were created due to leftover materials during wartime transitions. And while 2003 was not a transitional year officially, the possibility of leftover or experimental planchets has always fascinated collectors, and even the smallest hint of an undocumented alloy or wrong metal can send shockwaves through the collecting community. And beyond wrong planchets, the 2003 D cent is also known for the potential of dramatic double die errors, which are among the most valuable and collectible mistakes in U.S. coinage, because double dies occur during the die creation process when a die receives multiple misaligned impressions from the hub, resulting in double design elements on every coin struck by that die. And while modern hubbing techniques reduced the frequency of strong double dies, they did not eliminate them completely. And a bold double die on a 2003 D cent showing clear separation on Lincoln's portrait, the date, the word liberty, or iron god we trust would immediately attract intense attention, especially if the doubling was thick, rounded, and easily visible without magnification, and the value would skyrocket if that double die went unnoticed for years, allowing only a small number of coins to escape into circulation before the die was retired. Because scarcity combined with dramatic visual appeal is a powerful driver of value, and collectors have repeatedly shown a willingness to pay enormous sums for the finest examples of major double dies, even in relatively modern dates, and the story becomes even more compelling when we consider the possibility of multiple errors occurring on the same coin, because error stacking is where true legends are born, and a 2003 cent that combined a double die with another major error such as an off-center strike, a broad strike, or a rotated die would be exponentially rarer than a single error coin, because the odds of two independent mistakes occurring on the same piece are incredibly small, and collectors understand this, which is why multi-error coins often command prices far beyond what logic alone might suggest, and off-center strikes are another category where the 2003 cent can shine, because while minor off-center strikes are relatively common, a dramatically off-center strike that still shows the full date and mint mark is far rarer and far more valuable, and if a large portion of the design is missing while key identifying features remain visible, the coin becomes both identifiable and visually dramatic, and again, the value increases significantly if the off-center strike is combined with other anomalies, such as a partial collar error that creates an unusually shaped edge, or a second strike that overlaps the first, producing ghost-like images of Lincoln's portrait. And speaking of multiple strikes, double strikes and triple strikes are among the most visually fascinating errors. Because they show the coin being struck more than once by the dies, often at different angles or positions, and a 2003 cent with a clear multiple strike that leaves overlapping design elements while remaining unflattened and undamaged would be highly desirable, especially if the strikes occurred off-center or with rotation, because such coins look chaotic yet beautiful, capturing a frozen moment of mechanical failure. And then there are die deterioration errors, which occur when dies are used far beyond their optimal lifespan, causing cracks, chips, and cuts to form, and while small die cracks are common, large retained cuts that dramatically alter the design are rare and collectible, and a massive cut on a 2003 cent that removes part of Lincoln's head or lettering would already be impressive, but if that cut appeared alongside a double die or strike error, the coin would enter a completely different category of rarity, because it would represent a convergence of die failure and striking error, and we must not overlook plating errors, which are especially relevant to early 2000s Lincoln cents, because the copper plating process introduced a new set of potential problems, including peeling plating, missing plating, blistered surfaces, and folded copper layers, and while minor plating issues are often dismissed, extreme cases where large sections of copper plating are missing or improperly bonded can create dramatic two-tone appearances that immediately draw attention. And a 2003 cent with a major plating error combined with another significant mint error would be far more valuable than a plating error alone, because collectors value complexity and uniqueness, and rotated die errors also play a role in the mythology of the 2003 cent, because when the obverse and reverse dies are misaligned, the reverse can appear rotated significantly from its normal orientation, and while small rotations are not unusual, rotations of 90 degrees or more are rare and highly sought after, especially in combination with other errors, and the presence of a dramatic rotation adds yet another layer of intrigue, because it speaks to mechanical misalignment within the press itself, and condition is another critical factor that cannot be ignored, because a coin rumored to be worth millions must not only be rare, it must also be visually appealing and well preserved. And while some circulation wear is acceptable on dramatic errors, the highest values are reserved for coins that retain strong detail, clean surfaces, and minimal post-mint damage, because elite collectors expect quality alongside rarity, and this brings us to the importance of authentication and grading, because no claim of a $4 million penny can be taken seriously without professional verification, and third-party grading services play a crucial role in confirming whether an error is genuine and mint-made rather than the result of damage after leaving the mint, and once a coin is authenticated, weighed, measured, and encapsulated, it becomes part of the official numismatic record, allowing collectors to compare it to known examples and understand its true significance, and history shows us that many coins now worth millions were once dismissed or doubted, only to be accepted later after careful study, and the 2003 cent exists in this same space of possibility, because it is modern enough to be overlooked yet old enough for errors to have circulated unnoticed for years. And the narrative power of such a discovery cannot be overstated, because collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying a story, and a 2003 D penny discovered in everyday change, identified by a knowledgeable collector, authenticated against skepticism, and revealed as a unique or nearly unique error would capture imaginations far beyond the coin world, drawing media attention.